From Israel Adesanya being confused about his fight result to Chael Sonnen dubbing Bobby Knuckles as the best ever. Here are UFC fighters' predictions for Robert Whittaker versus Dricus Du Plessis. Starting with Izzy being confused about the matchup, the middleweight champ really doesn't know who he should put his money on. At first, he said he was manifesting a win for DDP, then decided that Bobby was going to win. It's not because he thinks that both fighters are evenly matched. Izzy wants to fight Dricus. In fact, he was ready to fight him right away, but the UFC decided against it. They chose to throw Dricus at Whittaker first. Adesanya revealed on his YouTube channel that he tried his best to make the fight happen. He got in touch with the UFC and asked for the match. He thinks there's no point in waiting around anymore, since there aren't any contenders left that he hasn't already taken out. As much as he wants to fight Dricus, he doesn't think that his newest rival will be able to beat Whittaker. The Stylebender predicts that Rob will be able to take the South African down in either the second round, or he's going to beat up Du Plessis for 3 straight rounds. The middleweight champ thinks that Dricus could win that fight by making the bout ugly. Even then, the Reaper will be able to go toe-to-toe with him. Bobby's too fast for the South African. He's fitter than him and has better cardio. Izzy thinks there's a 70% chance that Bobby will win this fight. That's huge coming from someone like him. But Izzy isn't the only middleweight who thinks Bobby will win. Jared Cannonier also thinks the same. He said it'll be tough to count the Reaper out of this fight. He also mentioned that it'll be interesting to see how Rob deals with Dricus, since he's someone who never gets tired and has a lot of stamina. Jared thinks that based on what both of these guys have done in the UFC, everything that they've achieved so far in their careers, the Reaper's the only fighter who will power through. The former middleweight champ has also made a prediction about this fight. I'm talking about Alex Pereira, and he's jumped on the Whittaker train as well. As soon as Dana announced this fight, Poatan took to Twitter and shared his thoughts. Alex is all in for Robert and said that it's going to be easy money for him. Let's face it, it's impossible to bet against the Reaper at this point, and Poatan knows it. He received a shortcut toward a title fight because he had a history with Izzy. If Pereira had to go through Bobby first, then the whole arc would have been a lot different. Everyone knows that if Adesanya wasn't around, Rob would have been the middleweight champ. That's why the UFC tries to avoid making him play the gatekeeper to the division as much as they can. Just take a look at the top 5 contenders in the middleweight division. How many of those guys have beaten or faced Robert? If Dana doesn't interfere like he always does, then you would have seen Bobby Knuckles versus Adesanya again and again. All the UFC pros know how good the Reaper is inside the octagon, and that's why they're all picking him to grab the win against Stillknox. But there's one fighter in the heavyweight division who thinks Dricus is good, but doesn't have what it takes to beat Whittaker. I'm talking about Chris Daukaus. He said that Du Plessis is, in his opinion, a good fighter. Everyone knows how much he gets hit in his fights. He takes so many unnecessary shots. Bobby, meanwhile, is going to exploit this weakness. He's going to keep hitting him until the South African goes down. There's also the fact that Stillknox runs out of gas pretty quickly. So, he thinks that stamina will play a big role in this fight. Whittaker's cardio is way better than Dricus. He hardly runs out of gas in his fights, and this is one of the reasons why Daukaus thinks that he's going to win. The featherweight divisions also made its decisions on who's going to win, specifically Cody Stamann. Stamann thinks that Bobby Knuckles will win this bout. At this point, I'm not even surprised. You have to accept the fact that Bobby is the clear winner. At least that's what everyone's saying. The featherweight fighter thinks that Dricus has done great so far. He's made a name for himself in the promotion, but Whittaker is too good an opponent for him. He went as far as to say that Bobby won the last fight he had with Izzy. Here's someone who still doesn't agree with the judge's decision on that one. Basically, what he's trying to say is that Robert is the one who deserves a shot at the title, and he's going to easily defeat the South African. Whether the judges made the right call in his bout against Adesanya or not, that's a completely different debate. We'll save it for some other day. While this is a very one-sided prediction, there's someone who probably summed it up the best, and it's Matt Frivola. He said both of these men have a similar fighting style. Both of them like to attack and make their opponents uncomfortable. But Rob's someone who has a lot more experience than Dricus. As everyone says, experience is everything. According to Matt, Bobby's experience in the UFC will win him this fight. Frevola also said that if Dricus tries to turn it into a bar fight due to his lack of experience, then Whittaker will have no problem dealing with him. He'll weather the storm with his insane fighting technique and go home with a win to his name. To be honest, you can't disagree with the guy. Whittaker's been in the game for a long time. He's fought big opponents before, and one of them is Adesanya, one of the greatest middleweights of all time. Fighting the best of the best teaches you things that no one else can, and this is what will help Bobby a lot at UFC 290. Not only him, but Orion Koshi, Drew Dober, and Natan Levy. They're picking the Reaper to win this fight. This shows how one-sided this fight actually is, and Du Plessis knows that. He admitted that he didn't do the smartest thing by picking up a fight against Rob, but he said he didn't get into the world of MMA to be smart. If he wanted to do that, he would have stayed in school and looked for a nice 9-to-5 job. Speaking of people appreciating still knocks, Frevola isn't the only fighter doing that. Alex Morono also had some good things to say about the South African. But guess what? Even he didn't think that Dricus could win that fight. Morono said there was no way that Dricus could hit the Reaper. He said the South African has done exceptionally well in his career. According to Alex, Dricus is a good dude, but there's no way that he's beating Bobby Knuckles. He said that the Reaper was also one of his favorite fighters, so he has to put all his money on him. Is there any fighter in the world who thinks Still Knox will win the fight? Considering everything I've talked about so far, I don't think there's anyone who thinks he can win. Poor Dricus. But these were all the people who thought that Bobby is a great fighter. He has what it takes to beat Du Plessis, but then there's someone who thinks Robert's even better than that. Chael Sonnen dubbed Bobby Knuckles the greatest ever. No, not the greatest fighter ever. The American gangster thinks that Whittaker's as good as any middleweight in the world. He's basically putting the Reaper on par with legends such as Michael Bisping and Anderson Silva. His statement holds a lot of weight because Sonnen himself has faced the middleweight greats. He said that Bobby is a better fighter than Adesanya in a lot of ways. But that isn't what he said after Izzy's win at UFC 287. After that event, Chael said Adesanya is the greatest middleweight ever to put on MMA gloves. There's no one else who comes close to achieving what Adesanya has achieved. But now, he's saying something totally different. Stick to your words, Sonnen. Still, he thinks that Whittaker is a more complete fighter than Stylebender. Well, don't you guys think that it's a bit too much? And with everything that he said, it's not a surprise that the gangster has picked Robert to win this bout. He thinks that Bobby's gonna beat the heck out of the guy. So there you have it, from Sonnen dubbing Bobby Knuckles as the greatest ever, to Israel Adesanya being confused about the result of this fight. These were some UFC fighters' predictions for Robert Whittaker versus Dricus Du Plessis.